Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everybody. To our Friday afternoon live stream. If you are in the Western Hemisphere. And I'm excited that we will be having this live stream today. We are going to be talking about trauma bonds. Okay. So we're just going to give a couple minutes to allow people to join in. We will be meeting for about an hour. And we will be diving into this topic today. I'm curious, for those of you that are here now already, do you know what a trauma bond is? Have you heard this term before? Is this new to you or not new? Also, if you are new to me or new to Insight Timer, please feel free to say hello in the chat where you're joining from if you'd like. And for those who don't know me, I'm Natalie. I'm a spiritual life coach and Reiki master teacher. I've been a teacher here on Insight Timer. Next month marks 5 years. I have been doing live streams fairly consistently here for the past 5 years. Yeah, it's been a wonderful journey. Hi, Allie, welcome. So for those of you just coming in, you can also give an emoji in the chat of your current mood, or a word in the chat just to get your voice into the room, if you care to. And if you want to just sit back, relax, and take in this information today, that's totally fine as well. Let's take a breath together. Breathing in through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth with a sigh. Welcome, Wendy. Great to see you, as always. So I will be going live on Sunday morning, as I usually do. So whatever time that is for you in the weekend, I will be going live at that time. I'll go ahead and share that live stream. So we're going to be talking about toxic shame, what it is and how to break the cycle. So I will be also very excited to dive into that with y'all, because, you know, this topic today about trauma bonding and toxic shame are things that, you know, aren't super well known or talked about. So we're going to be diving into that. Welcome, Lynn. Great to see you from Massachusetts. So I will go ahead and put up my follow card. If you don't follow me and you care to, you can do so here, but you can also do that anytime, anywhere in the app or in the live stream or afterwards, etc. So again, as I said, we're going to be talking about trauma bonding, what it is, and how to break the cycle. And, you know, I'm just going to start from a place of assuming that there are people here listening, or if you are going to be watching the replay, that you don't know what that means. We're just going to start from complete scratch, from zero. And go from there. So, oh, also, by the way, too, this is being double live streamed in my YouTube channel, so you can follow me there. All my replays are there. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram as well. Check out my website, and you can find all of that information in my link here in Insight Timer in my profile. I also have an Etsy store with digital workbooks that you can download instantly, and my biggest seller so far, my shop is still new, is trauma bond recovery. So if this resonates and you want a resource in order to work through that, you can go over there, and that is also linked in my Insight Timer profile, the Etsy store with the products, if that resonates. So a trauma bond is usually related or most popularly known to be related to a romantic relationship, and it is not exclusive to a romantic relationship. So regardless of, if you are in one or not, these dynamics can show up in other places as well. So just to open the field up, open the relatability up, that mostly it's been popularized through like a romantic relationship dynamic, and it's not exclusive to that. It can show up in family, friendships, work, authority figures, and all of those sorts of things. It's also a feature of a narcissistic relationship as well. So a narcissistic relationship has a lot of dynamics that are under that umbrella, of which trauma bonding is a part. But you can be trauma bonded and not be involved with a narcissist. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, and if anybody, of course, has any questions or wants to share or ask anything, share their experience or add to the discussion, please do so in the chat. So, a trauma bond is characterized by something that I mentioned recently in another live stream about anxious attachment, where there's something going on called intermittent reinforcement. So how many of you have heard of that term before? Intermittent reinforcement. It is what makes gambling so addictive. The reason gambling is addictive is because of intermittent reinforcement. So the classic example is if you think about using a slot machine. Most of the time, nothing is going to happen, and then a small percentage of time, and it's intermittent, it's not predictable. It's unpredictable, but there will be usually a win, right? So this applies to all sorts of gambling, and a slot machine feels like the most simple one, right? Like you just put the dime in or the money in, you pull the lever. What do you get? Mainly you get nothing, but that one time you get a win, even if it's only, the same amount of money you put in, there is a huge dopamine release and high and rush and reward. So that same mechanism is, that is intermittent reinforcement, and then we're going to translate that into what it looks like in a relationship. Hi, Maureen from New York. Yeah, I remember I was in a narcissistic relationship years ago, and I didn't know I was until it was over. And I remember still one time finding a video on YouTube about about this dynamic in relationships, and I was like, oh my God, this explains everything. And, it's great to learn information and knowledge, to have a context in which to put things in, and it's like, well, then what do you do with it, right? So we're going to really be diving into, information here today, because, this live stream is for everybody. You might be more of an expert at this than I am, or you may have never heard of it, right? So I meet people where we are, which is just assuming we're starting from zero. And so we're going to be really diving into what this is. And then also looking at then what do you do about it? But knowing that it exists is the first step. So if you think about translating that slot machine example into a romantic relationship. Hey Trish, welcome. Think about that dynamic of uncertainty, unpredictability, and getting a reward sometimes, right? So in a trauma bonding dynamic, and we're going to talk about romantic relationships just to keep it simple, and you can also translate this to parents, siblings, whatever, friends, bosses, coworkers. It's universally applicable. It's not exclusive to romance, and it's most felt in that, I think. So there's an intermittent cycle of harm and then reward, or there's a cycle of harm with intermittent reward. And this is why, if anybody's ever been in an abusive relationship, like, this trauma bonding dynamic is a part of that. If it's physical, whatever form of abuse it is, emotional, that there's, all of the horrible things that happen, the harm, but then you get that reward piece. And because of the harm caused, it makes that reward hit so much deeper. Parent and romantic for you, Maureen. Yeah, and I mean, I do want to say, like, a blanket, compassionate, I'm sorry to anybody who's experienced any of these dynamics. Nobody should experience this, abuse in any form. And it happens. So just to acknowledge that. Hi, Laurette. Welcome. And Rose. So this trauma bond strengthens not despite the pain, but because of the alternating pain and then relief. So that creates this cycle where it is exactly, Rose, it's so hard to leave. Because, a popular way people put it is called breadcrumbing. You get this tiny crumb, and it feels huge because the normal nature of the relationship is so bad. And then that crumb hooks you to stay. So that's the win of the slot machine. But it only comes, once every so often. You can't predict it, but you keep staying because you want that hit. So, I mean, this is a nervous system thing, y'all. The nervous system, it then becomes internalized into that. And of course, if there's abuse going on, of course, the nervous system is on high alert and is affected. I mean, the body, mind, spirit, it's all affected. So that's what makes it so much deeper when that reward comes in whatever form it comes in. So the relief then is safety, and the nervous system clings to that and stays. Oh, yeah. So, and I just want to say, like, it's not about weakness. It's not about the person. Like, if you've been in this, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, or you're weak, or you're flawed, or you're not good enough. It's not a judgment, like a moral or value judgment about you as a human being. Just to say. And normally these dynamics come, if somebody had a not great childhood, there's a higher propensity for a person, getting into a dynamic like that, not because of anything they're doing or not doing, but that's just, we go to what's familiar. We recreate home, our childhood home, and adult relationships because it's unresolved and we want to heal it. So the unpredictability of the rewards strengthen the attachment cycle. And if we look at and this kind of goes more into some narcissism and romance dynamics, if anybody has ever experienced what's called love bombing. And love bombing can be in friendships too, or in, like somebody starts out at work and they become the boss's new favorite immediately and they get special treatment, but then eventually it changes. Like, so again, you can apply this in different ways. But love bombing is romantically when you first meet somebody and they just sweep you off your feet and they totally consume you. They have no boundaries. It's like love at first sight, and want to be with you all the time and shower you with gifts and affection and attention and love and all of that, and then they pull away. And so the trauma bond happens if there's an abuse dynamic going on, the person's pulled away, but then maybe they take an action they used to take in the beginning, and then it feels so good. And then, because if you're caught in that dynamic, if you're the victim of it, you stay because you want what you had in the beginning with that person, and the mind gets stuck on that version of the person which no longer exists and which was a facade. But then these little crumbs of a hit happen. They act nice, or they bring you a gift like they did in the beginning, and then you think, oh, maybe they're changing, maybe things are being different, maybe things are going back to the way it used to be. So that's that reward lever. Rose, I hear you in that, Maureen. And it's hard when you see that in other dynamics and you can't say anything. So there's a cycle, right, that happens where there's tension in the relationship. There's, how many of you can relate? Walking on eggshells, anxiety, something just, and this can go back to childhood if there was abuse there, and like maybe even you can relate, like the parent comes home and shuts the door and walks in, and you hear it, and you don't even see them yet, but you can just feel that things aren't good. So that's sort of an energy. And then something happens. There's an incident. There's a fight, or maybe the person sulks and pulls away and is silent. Maybe there's abuse or harm, some betrayal. And then comes the reconciliation. So that reconciliation piece, that's the reward part of the cycle. There's an apology, there's affection, there's closeness, maybe there's promises. How many of you can relate to hearing a bunch of promises and words, I'm going to change, and then the actions never follow through? So that's the reward part, that the mind and the nervous system, because then that sense of relief, the calm after the storm, after the reconciliation, then the calm. There's a brief stability that creates hope. Again, like I said, oh, maybe things are different. They seem so sorry. But then again, the tension starts building again. The cycle repeats. The bond gets stronger the longer it goes on. The nervous system gets more addicted and attached. The relief feels like love. Thank you, Allie, for the donation. Maureen, I so see you in that. I have similar dynamics with my mother, and it's that wounded inner child that wants mommy or daddy, depending on the case. And the thing is, we have to fire our parents as being our parents. Once we are no longer teenagers living under their roof and dependent upon them for our needs, we get to fire them. Doesn't mean we need to end the relationship, but we are adults at that point. And it's about learning to give ourselves what we're waiting for our parent to give us, that it will never happen. Well, I won't say never, almost never. Rose. Yeah. We need to watch for people's actions, not their words. Words are hollow. Words are empty. So we're also going to look at warning signs like this when you meet somebody new, so the same thing doesn't happen again. That sounds tough, Maureen and Lynn, with you and your 93-year-old mother. So we get to become that parent that we're waiting for, that wounded part of ourself is waiting for. So that's part of the breaking of the cycle. But we're just diving into what that cycle is. So what does it feel like to be in this dynamic? You miss them even when you know it's unhealthy. Or you replay the good moments and minimize the painful ones. Or you miss how it used to be, like if you're married or living together. Or if you decide to leave, then you get pulled back in somehow. Or you feel confused. You feel confused about intensity, about connection, about love. There's emotional dependency, crumbs of closeness, crumbs of affection, crumbs of intimacy or calm. And the mind just goes freaking crazy with this because it's wanting to make sense so it can help you feel safe. And the thing is, you can't think your way through this. It's a once this cycle really sets in, it's a nervous system thing. So it usually forms with relationships where there's inconsistency, unpredictability, and emotional highs and lows. How many of you have been in a dynamic with inconsistency, unpredictability, highs and lows? And again, it could be parent, it could be boss, it could be sibling, friend, coworker. Even some dynamics, it might be if you're in a spiritual community, it could be the leader of the community. So this fits. So it's where love and pain get intertwined. And it feels like love because the mind latches on to, the crumbs or the love bombing in the beginning, because it's like, well, I see how they could be. They've been this way before. I know they can do this. I know it's possible. But the thing is, we cannot stay based on the past. And the mind will be addicted and obsessed with just remembering that part of it. And so then the person, that's the abused or the victim in the trauma bond cycle, they completely lose their power because they're so addicted. And this person and all of those dynamics it's like nervous system regulation. And then it just becomes the new normal. And it's like that person, the minuscule moments of where there's the reward, the person's nervous system gets addicted to that, just like the slot machine. And then, the 95% of the time, it's that tension. It's that survival mode. It's the fear. It's the abuse. And this is why, I imagine some of you have experienced this, and I imagine all of us have known people or heard of situations, especially with physical abuse. Why doesn't she just leave, right? It's usually a man, physically abusing a woman. And this is why, because of those crumbs that come. So the thing is, it's the victims of this become hopeaholics. Have you been a hopeaholic in a relationship? Have you stuck around hoping they will change? Yeah, I have too. Yes, Lorette, that's a great point. The person is exciting. And that's what I was about to talk about next. Love versus trauma bonding dynamics. Hi, Mindy. Yeah, repetition compulsion sounds the same as intermittent reinforcement. Yeah. So it's like staying, and then again, the words, there might be empty promises made. And it's so painful, and I really just want to say, like, I am so sorry for those of you who have been victims to this. And, you know, the thing is like, information and education bring awareness, and that awareness can facilitate change. It's not the only thing needed, and you know, as I said, I remember the first time I heard all this and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know there was like words for all of this. I didn't know this was a thing. It was a relief to know. But, and also it's like, well then what am I going to do about it, right? So it's a journey. And if you're not in this dynamic and you're looking back and you're like, oh my God, I can see it here, I can see it there, it's like, well, great. Then you get to use this information to arm yourself with information moving forward into what you look for in a future dynamic. Yeah. And honestly, y'all, I just ended a connection with a person where I was a hopeaholic. And this one is interesting. I'm going to share this because this person in this dynamic, it was not abusive. So this might hit for some of y'all. Everything we've described kind of points at it being, you know, an abusive relationship from the other party, but it doesn't always have to be. I was in what you would call a situationship with somebody. Who all does not know the word situationship? And even if you don't, you can probably gather the meaning just from the word, but I'll define it a bit if there's anybody that doesn't know. Lorette, great, okay. So a situationship is a relationship that's not fully a like committed relationship. It's undefined, it's in between, it's like kind of a what are we, and usually, and just usually it's a woman, you know, with a man, or a feminine with a masculine energy, and the feminine wants the committed relationship and the monogamy and the partnership, but the masculine wants the freedom and doesn't want the commitment and doesn't want the pressure, you know, more of that like avoidant and anxious attachment energy. And so the situationship remains undefined, remains inconsistent, and so, you know, that's the benefit to the avoidant, to where there's no commitment and there's no accountability and there's no responsibility, and they just get to, you know, engage and show up in the relationship or the situationship whenever's convenient for them and whenever they want to, while the anxious, usually feminine energy person is the one deeply wanting, you know, a real relationship, but it remains in a friends with benefits or just total non-accountability, unpredictability. So that can be called a situationship. So like with this person I was involved with, we were never like together. We were just involved. So that's kind of a perfect definition. And I was the one that really was into him, wanted to be with him. And in the beginning, he was very affectionate and love bombing. And because of the way things unfolded, I trusted it and I believed it, and that was on me. And not to blame or shame myself. You know, it needed to happen in that way for me to be sitting here with you right now, you know, in some sense. But, you know, just over the time we were involved, it was this intermittent reinforcement pattern where he would come in, and because I was a hopeaholic, I kept thinking he was going to change, and he would do things and say things that would keep the hope alive. And so even though he was not being malicious, he wasn't doing it on purpose. He was just doing what he was doing. But because of where I was with it and what I wanted and my nervous system and all of that stuff, I got addicted because of this intermittent reinforcement cycle. And then what happens is you start tolerating or like accepting less and less, and then you're accepting these tiny crumbs. And so it was like I became trauma bonded just because of this cycle, even though he wasn't maliciously doing anything. He was just inconsistent and unavailable, which that was actually that was the consistency, being inconsistent and unpredictable and unavailable. So, as I said, I have this new Etsy store that I've created around breakup recovery and toxic relationship recovery. And I created this trauma bond recovery workbook that has become my bestseller. And as I'm creating the workbook, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've known about this, but I didn't see it in this dynamic I'm talking about. And I'm like, wow, this is explaining everything. Yeah, Callie, and codependency is involved in all of this for sure. So, a trauma bond versus love, and Lorette alluded to this before. The trauma bond is driven by inconsistency and intensity, and then relief or calm after pain and harm. So it's a roller coaster. There's very high highs and very low lows. And then the nervous system becomes addicted and attached and adapted to this. But that is not love. It can feel like love because it's so compelling and strong and powerful, and maybe because of the love bombing in the beginning and all of the things that were said. But love is safe. Love is consistent. Love is stable. And if you've grown up in unpredictable, unstable households, likely you've created that in every romantic relationship you've had. And likely if you've met somebody safe and stable, you thought they were boring and you weren't interested, and there was no chemistry. Who all can relate to that? The trauma bond creates urgency, creates craving, creates obsession, overthinking. Love is steady, love is clear, love is consistent, love is predictable, love is available, love is equality and sharing and intimacy and all of those things. That's great that you are no longer with the recent boyfriend, Trish. So, how codependency can show up is more in the terms of like rescuing, fixing, over-functioning, taking responsibility for others, doing things for other people that they need to be doing for themselves, which trauma, like in a trauma bond, that can all happen. But there can be codependency, without it. I would say any sort of anxious attachment, narcissism, trauma bond, toxic relationship, emotional abuse, any kind of abuse, there's codependency in that. But codependency alone can also exist outside of that. Trauma bonding is about that addictive pull, the cycle itself. Codependency is about the role. So they overlap, but they're not the same. Exactly, Mindy. So if we look at other relationships, I know most of you have had a toxic friendship or a draining friendship or a one-sided friendship. It can show up in that way. Now, I would say the romantic and maybe parents are going to be the most intense. With family, it can be attachment to inconsistent or emotionally unavailable parents or caregivers. In work, how many of you have had a toxic workplace environment? There could be intermittent validation, like I said earlier, intermittent reinforcement with validation at work or recognition at work. So what ends up happening in this trauma bond cycle is love becomes associated with inconsistency and instability. So there never can be a relaxation in the body. And that is very detrimental and taxing to the person's nervous system. And if you guys have been in that sort of dynamic anywhere in your life, you know exactly what I mean. It's like this constant sense of being fried all the time, like feeling constantly on edge. And then it's like, what does this cost you? What does it cost you to be in this dynamic? What have you given up? How have you changed who you are? Have it changed your likes and dislikes? Maybe you've silenced yourself. Yeah, it is hard to leave, Rose. It is very hard to leave, and it's possible. You know what it reminds me of? Because really, as I said, the intermittent reinforcement is addiction. It's literal addiction in the body. The nervous system becomes addicted. It's addicted to the highs and the lows. So I'm an addiction expert with my own lived experience, and also what I did for my career before I became a life coach. It's about hitting a bottom in that relationship where you're like, I can't do this anymore. It's just like somebody that's a drug addict or alcoholic or a gambling addict or anything. There's got to be something that happens inside of you. It might be based on external events. Maybe the same thing happened again in the relationship one more time, but for some reason you feel you're done. And learning about this stuff can help, because what this shows is the futility of it. It's never going to be any different, and it's never going to change. It's only going to get worse the longer that you stay. And it requires something internal to happen. It could be a combination of something happening outside, and it's like something happens inside where it's just like, I'm done, I'm ready, and I'm done. Just like with quitting anything or giving up anything, there's got to be some sort of decision, some sort of hitting a bottom. And this is just my take on it. So you don't want to force yourself to detach emotionally overnight, but if you're hearing this and you're in this, like, likely it's been going on. So it might be making, what's the first baby step? And you want to start seeing the cycle clearly without minimizing it, because our minds will justify and rationalize and minimize and diminish and become addicted to the hope, or remembering the good times, replaying the good memories, but forgetting like the 10% good memories. The mind goes to those, not remembering the 90% bad memories. So my workbooks in my Etsy store focus on all of this. A lot of the exercises are about fantasy versus reality, because this is what happens. The mind gets attached to the fantasy, even memories. You might have this good memory, but if you zoom out and look, what happened before, what happened after, or what actually, this part of the situation, but you forgot about, when they said or did or didn't say or do that. Hey Louise, great to see you. How does the one holding back get benefit? Can you say more about that? You mean like the person in quote control, or the avoidant? Well, I mean, they're addicted as well, but they're coming from, the other side of things. There's power, there's control. They're just as addicted to the highs and lows. I feel most of us are going to be on the other side of it, unfortunately. So there's got to be clarity and awareness about this. There's got to be an interruption of the pattern. Remember I said tension, incident, reconciliation, calm, and then tension again. So even starting to notice, where are you? Tension, the incident, reconciliation, and calm or relief after. So even starting to notice like, this is the tense phase, like tuning into your body, tuning into your nervous system, that can help. Because it helps depersonalize it, because it's all very personal. Right? It feels all very personal, and it is, and it's also the somatics. So when there's the tense phase, when there's distance, if there is a fight, or if they've disappeared, or if it's tense, you allow that distance, because the nervous system is addicted to the pull and the relief that they associate with that person. So that person becomes the drug. So you've got to stop giving your nervous system the drug. So you've got to allow the discomfort of distance without immediately fixing it. Hi, Shiva. I think anybody can change, and if somebody has true narcissistic personality disorder, which I think it's a lot less than social media says, because it's like everybody's calling everyone a narcissist nowadays. I mean, as a life coach, my job is to be in possibility with people and help people feel into that. So yes, and it creates, just as hard as it might feel for you to leave, like it's going to be that much of a mountain for a person to climb for them to change. But if there's willingness to change, but that gets sticky, right? Then it's like, again, the hopeaholism kicks in. So you can think about, instead of looking at what are they doing, what are they not doing, what's wrong with me, why do I want them, blah, 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 you can start looking at what part of the cycle are you in, and tuning into your body and your nervous system, and noticing that pull, and noticing that addictive urge. So, yeah, what do y'all think? We're coming to the end of our session. And just put a word in the chat of like what you're taking away from this today. And I do want to offer, for those of you who haven't had a gifted session with me before, that we can have my powerful visioning process that I offer. And if this particular topic speaks to you, it can be all about trauma bonding or whatever your relationship dynamic is. And we will look at what's happening. Where are you stuck? And then what do you want? And where do you want to go? And this is something I offer as a gift to my Insight Timer community. So you can send me a message. And also, as I said, if you want to download my Trauma Bond Recovery Workbook, I've also got Detach from a Toxic Relationship. That one should be coming out, let's say, by 48 hours. I have an Anxious Attachment Breakup Recovery Workbook. So all, different angles to help you heal. And Mindy, yes, I'm so glad you said that about the nervous system. So if you've had these toxic dynamics and trauma bonding and all of that, and you're out of it, and maybe you're starting to date again or whatever, people that are healthy can feel boring. And you might say there's no chemistry and I'm not attracted. And you get to discern what about the dynamic, where is that actually true, versus have you just been conditioned by trauma bonds to where it feels, your system just feels bored and you're not attuned. So that stability and that safety can feel uncomfortable. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Donna. Oh, no worries. Yes, Donna, this will be on my replay. So as soon as this ends, like the live stream ends, it will be up as a replay on my YouTube channel. And Donna, if you want the direct link, just send me a message or an email. Lynn's gotten clarity. Wonderful. Hi, Gloria. Yeah, I mean, when somebody too has their own addictions, be it substance or otherwise, workaholism, gambling, hoarding, food, sex, porn, whatever, that very much is part of a trauma bonding cycle. Because what happens if you are involved with an addict of any kind, it could be social media nowadays, if they are addicted to something else, that is where their intensity lies. Their intensity does not lie in the connection with you. Their focus is on their addiction, and your focus is on them, and you are addicted to them, as it were. So it's like the person, their intensity is outside the relationship into whatever they're addicted to, but your intensity and focus is on that person and you're secondary to that. So that's when the codependency comes in. Love addiction. That is love addiction. And see, that's another lens we can bring in. You know, these are not just little binary things. Oh, wonderful, Donna. Thank you. And Gloria, yeah. I mean, healing definitely is possible, and it's not a one and done, and it's not a quick fix. And it's totally possible. And really, it's about feeling safe in your body. If you've been in trauma bonds and all of this, there is not safety in the body, because the nervous system associates safety with the crumbs in that very, intermittent reinforcement, the very small little glimmer or reconciliation or affectionate moment or whatever. And then the rest of the, so the safety, like the agency, goes outside of the person. And it's basically giving your power away, but it's not done consciously. It's just what happens in the dynamic. So, the body must be attended to. And I do that in my sessions as well. Talking about it up here and being up here, of course, there's a place for that. And because of the way our minds work, we really love to be up here about it. But the healing is when we drop into the body and feel about it in the moment. Hi, Jacqueline. Exactly, Mindy. We outsource our sense of connection, safety, and belonging. Catherine, you asked about a meditation. Do you have any ideas? I have a relationship cord cutting, breakup and cord cutting meditation here on Insight Timer in my free tracks. It's one of my, I think my second most popular track. And that's more of, a visualization and process, which many people have found helpful. So that can help, and it's not necessarily going to be the only one thing that you do. So check out my Etsy store if you feel drawn to, actually diving into and writing about and seeing what the dynamics are and shifting those and getting clarity on paper. And again, as I said, my visioning process, if you haven't had a gifted session with me, there's no cost to it for those of you in the community who haven't had that before. And we can dive into this or wherever else you feel stuck in your life. So I will be going live again on Sunday, as I said. I so appreciate everybody joining. If anybody cares to donate, you can do so anytime. And also, my computer's a little bit frozen. Yeah, anyway, you can donate if this was helpful. I will be going live again Sunday morning on this side of the world. I'm in Mexico. Yeah, it's not popping up. Oh, there it goes. Anyway, yeah, so I'll see if I can pull up the live stream this Sunday. So it's about toxic shame. And honestly, if you can relate to things that were said today, you have toxic shame, because if you grew up in a dysfunctional childhood, you have toxic shame. So I invite you to join in. There it is. 10:20 a.m. Eastern on Sunday the 29th. So there's a lot to dive into in this topic, and I'm just I'm moving through it myself. So this will be very informative and interesting. And you're welcome, Gloria. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Oh, Mindy, I offer what's called a visioning process. It's a one-on-one process that I do with people. So if you feel called, or anybody here feels called to reach out to me one-on-one, we would set up a time, we would meet, I would take you through that process where we would look at where do you feel stuck in your life, if it's in a trauma bond, or it might be something else. It doesn't have to be just that. But it's a very powerful process. We zoom out on your life, we dive in, we look deeply at where you may feel just trapped or stuck, or just ready for change. And then we look at where you want to go and what's in the way of that. So if anybody feels the heart's call to do that, reach out to me one-on-one. You can send me a message here or social, follow me everywhere. Always appreciated. Yeah. Thank you. Did I say thank you, Lynn, for the donation? You're welcome. Thank you all. I'm really passionate about this because of my own past experiences and my own healing journey. Yeah. And there is hope, and there is healing, and there is possibility here. It is all possible. So do not give up if you do feel, you're in this cycle. You're not alone, and there is help and there is support for you to leave. So reach out, get help. If it's reaching out to me, great. If it's with somebody else, great. There's so many wonderful resources. Thank you, Louise. Oh, wonderful, Gloria. Age doesn't matter in terms of healing, in our healing journey. It's wonderful you're here, and all of you. So thank you so much. And I will see you all in a few days. Namaste.